Hey everybody, this is Dr. Rumsey. For proposal lecture number 3, I am going to be going over a series of documents that you can see here on the screen. And because I'm going over so many documents, my face is not actually part of this lecture, so you'll just have to deal. This first document that you see here is the proposal assignment details. So this is just the assignment sheet. It gives you the expectations that I have for each of you. And you're going to be arguing or proposing for a research project of some kind. Some of you are going to be proposing a primary research project, and some of you are going to be proposing a secondary research project. If you are, well, one thing to keep in mind is that all of the writing that you do in this class, so this is a semester-long project, right? You are proposing work to be done over the entire semester, so it has to be good. It's a 400 level course, whole semester project. Okay, so for those of you who are currently in senior design, in any of the engineering technology, information system, computer science, what have you, various programs, then you are most likely doing primary research. Now, primary research basically means that you are creating something. Okay, you are making a widget, or you are making a process, or you are creating a server, or you are creating something. Okay, you are going to include such things as observation, experimentation, testing, interviews, questionnaires, and recorded reviews. Some examples that I offer you here would be designing and testing a product. Okay, so anyone in MET, probably WET to a certain extent, even industrial is you're gonna find that this is what this is. And so, for example, you might be creating and testing a software app for the iPhone, or you might be designing and testing an optical sensing device to measure foot traffic through the SkyBridge. Comparison testing of a typical color laser printer versus an inkjet printer. I mean, I've had a host of different projects over the last 10 years, and you can kind of get the idea from that. Now, some of you also then might be doing qualitative or quantitative research with surveys or interviews. So primary research, like that's the kind of stuff that I do in my field. When I'm publishing new research in my field, it's primary, but it's quantitative. So that means that I do some kind of a data collection where I interview people, I then code the data, and then I publish the results. This might be beneficial to you if you are if you're not in senior design, and you are looking for a project, or perhaps if you are even in senior design but you are maybe in information systems and you're still trying to figure out what a senior design project looks like in that field. So you might interview people, hand out surveys, use SurveyMonkey, those sorts of things. Particularly for people who are English majors, this might be a really relevant way of doing research on a technical topic that you find interesting. So beyond those two things, that's creating new knowledge, if you will. The other option then is to do secondary research. Now, secondary research is essentially what you have been doing every time someone has assigned you a, quote, research paper in most of your classes across the last 4 years. So that means that you gather things like academic journals, trade journals, magazines, corporate and government reports, white papers, those sorts of things, and you compile all of those things into an extensive and exhausted report done that essentially is reporting on the primary research of other people. Okay, so some examples that I have here: a review of the current status and research of a controversial medical procedure. Okay, maybe you're looking at stem cells or life-extending biomedical research. You might look at newspapers and magazines, reporting articles that are scholarly as well as from leading biomedical trade journals, those sorts of things. Another example might be a review of current products associated with green energy. So if you're an English major, if you are an education major, or if you're not in senior design, this may be another option of what you could choose to do a project on and write about this semester. So for this assignment, the proposal, it's divided into a couple of things, okay? there are going to be, well, actually the proposal is a single thing. Future assignments that will also document your research project will be an elevator speech, a progress report on how you're doing with whatever it is that you proposed, an oral presentation, and then a white paper. The white paper is the final document that you submit to me. For those of you in senior design, it is a variation of what you submit in senior design most often. Okay, so remember, there's an entire arc of work that's expected this semester. You're proposing what you're going to do right now, and then later on you're going to do what you said you'd do. So the proposal should be completed as follows. I'd like you to read a couple things. There's the list there you can read. I'm going to go over formatting guidelines and proposal guidelines here in a moment. You're going to meet with me here in week 1. And or maybe the second week, depending on how quickly you make an appointment with me, to talk about what your topic is. You're going to do a rough draft, and that rough draft is going to be edited and reviewed by several people in a peer review group. And then you're going to complete that peer review for everyone else by the date listed. You're going to revise your proposal accordingly and submit the final draft. Okay? One of the things to keep in mind is that, yes, I'm willing to give you comments on your proposal drafts, but you need to make an appointment for me to talk with you. Otherwise, I am trusting that you are seniors, juniors and seniors, who are more than capable of commenting on each other's work and getting it to a professional quality that is gradable by me. Okay, grading criteria, I'm looking for persuasion. I'm looking to actually believe that, number 1, there's a problem or an issue, and number 2, that you have a means of solving it. I'm looking to understand what your level of interest is in the topic and the complexity of the research that you're proposing. If you're proposing something that's kind of mamby-pamby, I'm going to say so. Okay, 400 level project for the entire semester is what you're after. Genre knowledge is basically, does it look like a proposal? Does it follow the guidelines? Quality of your peer reviews, it's a separate graded item, but I'm looking for you to actually be the kind of peer reviewer that you hope other people are for you. And then revising, editing, and the writing process. Are you submitting drafts along the way, and how good of a job do you at reinventing or rewriting certain sections? Okay, and that is it on the assignment. This document is available under Important Course Documents. It's also available in, I believe, the week 1 or week 2 folder. Okay, so second thing that keep in mind, this is formatting guidelines. This is available to you under Important Course Documents. This is just the general guideline of what all your documentation in this class should look like. Okay, things that you're going to know. This whole document is written as I would like it to look. Okay, so you're going to note that single spacing is important. Technical writing should be single spaced. That is one of the defining features of what characterizes this kind of writing. If it's single spacing, keep in mind that paragraphs should not go full pages. Like you're looking at maybe 10 to 12 lines of text before you start the next paragraph. Full block means that everything is flush with the left-hand margin. Okay, the reason that I do this is that it's easy. It's sort of like you find a really great trick to coding and you just happen to use that same trick over and over again because it's efficient. When I say full block, it just means you don't have to hit tab. You don't have to worry about missing a tab or tabbing too many times. Everything should be flush with the left-hand margin for simplicity, that clarity, concision, remember the 3 C's? Okay, font style, I'm looking for something invisible or universal. This means that you need to choose something that's a normal font. Fancy fonts come in handy when you're marketing, maybe in your resume headings, things like that, but otherwise you need to do something like Times New Roman. Calibri is the new Microsoft Word default, or Arial is appropriate. Next thing down is font size. Microsoft Word with Calibri is 11-point font. That's fine. Times New Roman is generally 12-point font, and Arial should be size 10 or 11. If you get into size like 12 with Arial, it starts to look kind of puffy and cartoonish. So keep it tight and close. I don't give page requirements, so you don't have to dink around with how big the text is to try and get a page number. Like, none of those tricks work in this class, so let it go. Let's see, lastly, you're going to use headings, and you'll note that I used them throughout this document. I choose to make mine pretty, so to speak, with color, but I'm still looking for there to be headings, things that differentiate between sections. Again, that makes a document, I think I mentioned this in the first lecture on proposals, it makes a document skimmable. So someone can look at an entire document and think, hey, I just want to know about cost and benefit, and they can jump to that section really easily because you have headings demarcating that particular section. Okay, so next document then is the proposal guidelines. So these are suggestions. None of these are required. Each of these things each proposal you're going to do is different. Okay, right? I mentioned it in lecture 2 that every single one of you is essentially doing an independent study or an independent project. And so I'm trying to give you an overview of what various things you could put in them. Okay, so refer back to that one, back to lecture 2 if you'd like more information on what contents might be included, but here's some examples. In your introduction, you might provide an overview and a background section. In your current situation, you might provide a problem or purpose statement as well as objectives. Your project plan solution might have target specifications, costs, timeline, and testing. And then qualifications or personnel, I talked about that in lecture 2 quite a bit, and your conclusion. Okay, so this is just essentially a condensed version of what you observed in lecture number 2 so that it's tight and concise and you can come back to it more easily. Okay, so next up what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go through several student samples. Now this one is it's dated, it's 2012, but it's still really good, and so I still use it because it's so good. Chuck Kraft was a student who graduated in 12, and he was in ECET. Okay, you can see that there. And what he did for my class, he was in phase 2, and so that means that he revised his final, his proposal that he wrote for senior design. Sometimes it's done in phase 1 or early in phase 2. He revised it for my standards. Okay, so he reduced it to about 8 pages from its original length of about 18 pages. So if you are in senior design and you have a 2-phase type of senior design, you may use the original document, but you've got to revise it. If you are in MET or IET, probably the document's going to suffice, except that I think sometimes they don't want a very long one, and I'd like a lot more detail, because again, I'm trying to prepare you for as broad of a perspective of written documentation in the technical world as I can. So if your proposal is only like 2 pages, probably needs to be 3 or 4 to bolster it a little bit more. So here Chuck has a table of contents. It may or may not be necessary. If your project proposal is, 4 pages, it really doesn't need a table of contents, let's be honest. So here he has an introduction and an executive summary, right? And those 2 things really make up, I would say, what would be called his introduction section. Okay, we'll talk a lot more about executive summaries once we get toward the end of the semester, because white papers often include them. Now, his formatting here, you're also going to note, is very professional. It's crisp and clean. He uses headings really well. He's got graphics that represent things, right? He's got his block diagram of his hardware going here. He has some bulleted lists, but they're introduced really well. Okay. And then here's his project plan. He's got bullet points. Now, one thing to notice here that he kind of a little slip up. It's a small thing, and most people wouldn't notice, but here he's got a round bullet point, and up here he has a square one. It's a minute detail, but if you want to know what are those tiny things that are going to start impressing your audience, it's those kinds of tiny details that can actually make a difference. Specifically when we get into the second thing this semester called communicating self, and you're working on your resume. Okay, so just a little hint for the future. Okay, let's see here. I mean, you kind of get the idea. He's got really good information. Here is his time and task list. It's broken down from the Gantt chart rather than trying to plunk in the Gantt chart. So, but here's the Gantt chart also. You can kind of see how tiny this is. It's not great, but it's better than some I've seen. I've seen some that have, like he has what, less than 40 tasks. I've seen some that have 100 tasks and it goes on for 4 pages and I can't read any of it. That's not helpful, so don't do that. Qualifications and conclusion. Okay, so you get that idea. That is an example of someone who is currently in senior design. Next, I'm going to show you a sample of an English major. Now, this is not, for those of you who are English majors, this isn't the best example. I'm going to actually provide you with a better example later in the semester once I get approval from the student who wrote it. So this again was in about 2012, and what happened is that Brandy was working at Star Financial Bank, and she decided that she was going to turn this more into a business proposal rather than a technical one. But the two are so similar that it worked okay. Okay, so she was asked to prepare a proposal for digital marketing at the bank. So this was her talking about how she was going to compile what the going trends of a particular situation. She was going to look at different marketing techniques. She has the overview as well as an introduction, that's fine, and a background, which is fine, and a purpose. So all of those things combine together into sort of what would be called an introduction section. Okay, so then objectives. Okay, so target specs. One thing to note here is that she gave some really specific things that she was aiming for. Okay, a list, a chart, a display, techniques that are currently being used, those sorts of things. So she was able to get really specific. And when you're doing secondary research, hers is kind of more of a primary research in actuality. It's actually really difficult to write target specifications for secondary research, but it can be done, and this is a way to do it. It's not a real long document. It's pretty simplistic, but it does the job. Okay. Her timeline is another alternate to a Gantt chart. Excuse me. Tasks obviously over here, and then dates and what week it would fall. And then the thing I really liked about this one is that she came up with a project that was relevant to her current job, relevant to her life. And so that's the major goal. Think about what your career aspirations are and try and find a project that's going to benefit you in the long run. Okay, and then last but not least is someone who is in a technical field. He was an MET, but he was not currently in senior design. Okay, so there could be some of you. Spring I tend to have fewer, but fall, if you're hearing this in fall, this could be you. He had a family farm, and he decided he was going to improve the pasture because he wanted to expand what kind of animals he was able to produce on his family farm. And so he has the basics, the introduction, he has an objective, and you'll note here that it's only like a 3-page proposal, but it's one of my examples, which means it's really good. It has a real audience, a real need, and a specific plan for getting the job done. It's thorough. It uses headings and uses verbs for his objectives. So it's got all of the earmarks of a really solid proposal, even though it's very short. He was hoping to meet with the extension agent. He was going to actually look into sort of zoning laws and some of those other things later on in the semester, but that didn't show up here. So then, what else was I going to show you in this one? He's illustrated a real need in an audience for the white paper. So he's got something that he's really dedicated to and he's committed to. His idea is essentially to write the white paper, the final document for the class, so that other small farmers in Indiana can understand the requirements and create their own plan, and as well as to benefit his own family's small farm. So he's got an audience in terms of his family farm, but an audience too in terms of other people with family farms in Indiana. He's got a fairly short timeline. It needs probably a little more detail than this, but you know what? This is good enough. I would have approved this and let him move forward. Because he only addresses the things that are due for class, for the most part, it's kind of lacking. Note that he said, all preliminary research. Well, that covers a whole lot of information, and it might have been good for him to go ahead and break that down so that he has additional steps along the way. Okay, so that is it as far as examples and going over the basics of this assignment. If you have any questions, by all means, you can contact me through my email, which is rumsys@ipfw.edu. Take care. Hang in there, guys.